Joining us in studio ahead of the 1 p.m. Release of the June employment statistics is Loane Sharp, economist at the Free Market Foundation. Before we get into that, I don't know how much of the interview you picked up with Ketso Gordon, but this is an interesting development. If you know, Free Market Foundation, shareholders own a company, board of directors overstepping the mark, according to the CEO. So now the shareholders will make a decision. Interesting.
Yeah, it's it's a very different topic for shareholders to become involved directly in the management of companies. And in fact, there's some interesting structures that have been developed in corporate finance over the last 100 years that allow shareholders to exert influence, particularly the founding shareholders exerting influence over the companies that they started. So it's very interesting to see how shareholder activism works and doesn't work in certain cases. Mostly institutional shareholders don't like to second-guess management. They prefer simply to sell their shares if they don't.
In this case, they like Ketso. So
yes,
when
yes.
he resigned, they dropped the price nearly 8% on the day.
Yes.
So the board of directors must now be a little bit nervous about their certainly what Ketso's had to say. But anyway, we didn't ask you to come and talk about that. We asked you to come and talk employment stats. They're coming out at 1 o'clock. These are usually very broad figures. Are we likely to see any improvement?
Yeah, I think it's going to be disastrous. The economy is flat on its back and deteriorating. It's extraordinary that the Reserve Bank is raising interest rates when all the signals from the market are that the financial markets and the economy are in a very weak condition. Our modelling suggests that the economy needs to grow 4% per annum just to absorb the matriculants who come out of the schooling system each year, and the economy needs to grow 8% per annum to make substantial inroads into our formal sector unemployment problem. We're not anywhere near those sorts of growth rates. We have a very restrictive fiscal policy. We have a very restrictive monetary policy. The authorities are completely out of touch with what is occurring in the real economy. So it's going to be very bad news, not only for employment, but for all the things that depend on employment. You know, the sense of security that employees feel in their jobs is so crucial to retail performance, not only of retailers, but of all retail products and services like finance, transport, and so on. So we've got a really difficult time ahead.
Why are government out of touch? Is the constituency that government is representing saying we want it this way? Or is government just making decisions that are incompetent?
Well, government is ill-advised. So many...
Governments are really ill-advised. They usually are well advised by the constituents who put them there.
Well, this is what I mean. They're badly advised by the academics who have been captured by all the government consulting work that is available. Government has been captured by the trade unions who now represent only 12% of the private sector workforce. Government has been captured, you're quite right, by vested interests of all kinds. And all of these vested interests are reluctant to speak truth to power. And it's a real shame because more and more people are becoming marginalized. More and more people are suffering in the informal sector where jobs are not secure and so on. And government just keeps adding additional laws and regulations in the labour market. We've now got this preposterous idea of a national minimum wage, which government says it will investigate, which Cosatu says government will implement. And it just is greater uncertainty.
What do your models say about a minimum wage?
Yeah, the minimum wage is going to be disastrous for lower paid workers, lower skilled workers, particularly African youth. We're expecting that the unemployment rate in sectors like agriculture, mining, construction, and those areas where workers are either unskilled or semi-skilled, we're expecting job losses of about 1 million over the next 3 to 4 years if a 4,500 Rand minimum wage is agreed. Government is really out of touch with what the business community needs to create jobs.
What kind of incentives? How can incentives be changed? Because I hear from the politicians' side that we've got a youth wage subsidy. They've got all kinds of incentive that business is not taking up. Why?
Well, I think it's less a case of providing government incentives and more a case of government getting out of the way. not providing disincentives to employment. We've got a CCMA and a labour court that is hostile toward business. We've got government that sides with the more noisy but less representative union members in the country. You know, so government is behaving in a very populist fashion in the labour market, and the labour market is consequently in a shambles.
So if you're sitting in Jacob Zuma's shoes, and he said a few years ago that he would increase jobs by 5 million, the jobs he has increased has been in the public sector itself. So they've filled vacancies and in fact expanded the public sector. In his mind, he's at least part of the way by doing that to achieving what he's set out to do.
Well, public sector jobs are not jobs in any real sense. They're funded by the taxpayer. The important jobs are those provided by the private sector, which are a self-fulfilling prophecy. So it's appalling that government employment has increased from 1 million to 3 million over the last 20 years. And, you know, the problem with government is it's not even a good employer. Those 3 million civil servants are in fact deeply unhappy, according to the Public Service Commission, the Public Sector Coordinating Bargaining Council.
So they're getting it wrong.
They're getting it wrong everywhere.
Okay, so what do you do? How do you address
well,
this festering sore?
we've got to reverse some of the labour laws that are crucial to employers, especially small businesses. You know, JSE listed companies only employ 9% of the total workforce. 91% is in small and medium-sized enterprises. So we really need to make business easier for small businesses.
And what do you put the chances of that happening?
Well, there are two things that I think we've got a quite good chance of introducing, which are exemptions from, or partial exemptions from dismissal protections. You know, dismissal protections are something that small businesses complain about on an ongoing basis. It's so difficult to fire someone for poor work performance. It's not that businesses want to fire left, right and centre. They want at least to have a framework for dismissing employees for poor work performance. And the second thing is minimum wages which already exist in the economy, which are detrimental to our businesses. I mean, we could have a thriving clothing and textiles manufacturing sector if only we had competitive minimum wages.